Hello, everyone. This is just a quick recap to the last talk that I had on Sapiens. And we talked about basically the timeline regarding human history. And then we went on to talk about the cognitive abilities that Sapiens developed. And that, in fact, made them take control to a large extent the environment and about their lives. And when I say cognitive revolution, we're talking about the ability of the sapiens to have the ability to create stories and narratives that brought about a type of, that brought about the change in the brain as well as these narratives started to develop and the brain was able to interact with other sapiens. And therefore, the evolution that was basically driven by environmental situations or the climate and what have you, that in fact started to give rise to a change in the body and mind of the sapiens because of their ability to create things for themselves. And one of the things, of course, they created and controlled was fire and tools. And then they went into a bit of use of these items that they developed that enabled them to become much more in control of their environment. The biggest change that happened in the early part of their lives was, of course, the fire. Now, with the control of fire, they were able to cook food. And why this is important is because if you take the carnivores that we've got, and we've got the herbivores have very large stomachs, they eat a lot, and they're continually eating. So a lot of energy is taken by the stomach to be able to digest the food and so on. And if you take the carnivore, they have smaller stomachs and they eat more protein, as it were. And that meant that they didn't have to spend so much time eating or foraging for food. With the result that the energy that was expended in the stomach for digestion and so on reduced enormously in the case of carnivores. And in the case of sapiens especially, they spent less time eating and digesting the food. And that extra energy that they had, which they saved from the stomach, as it were, that went towards expanding their brain. Their brain cells grew. So we have, in fact, the growth of the sapiens brain grew a lot faster than the other animals that were there around. And that is mainly because we had the ability to cook our food, able to digest our food, get more energy out of it, but used less energy to do all that activity. And of course, if you look at the herbivores, they're eating quite a lot. And they spend a lot of money trying to, a lot of energy digesting that food in their stomachs, and less energy goes to their brains. Therefore, their brains haven't expanded as far and as much as in the case of sapiens. So that was one of the main reasons why the sapiens started to sort of become much more aware of the environment, control their environment to some extent through moving away from the hunter-gatherers type of phase to actually creating their own fields and growing agriculture and so on. So we have, in that case, the growth of our brain being responsible. Now, what we also see is that with the growth of the brain, the connectivity that is there between the cells, of course, grew with being able to experience that much more by being able to interact socially, overcoming their enemies and so on. So it was like a sort of incentive for the brain to grow. So we have now the biggest sort of contribution to the growth of the brain is, apart from the fire, they were able to create stories and narratives and myths. And with these narratives and myths, they were able to imagine a lot more and put it down in the way of communication with each other. And that helped to grow societies, bring the society to a common understanding that they all sort of accepted, and they were more organized in their approach to solving problems. So one of the big sort of steps that they took, of course, in solving their problems, when they moved away from the hunter and gatherers type of status, is to be able to have domesticated few animals and also agriculture. They were able to have tools to grow something in the ground, and then they became a lot more stationary types of tribes and societies. They didn't move as much as they used to before. And this is what we're going to be talking about with the next phase that is about the agricultural revolution. So with that, I'll stop and then continue with the agricultural revolution now. Okay. Put the recording on. So what happened then was, of course, we see the same ability of societies to have these power structures, and the surplus that is collected from the people is by way of taxes or what have you. This is used a lot of times for war to try and overcome somebody else and be able to then sort of attain whatever the objectives are. So in a way, once the agricultural revolution started, we have the ability to form a layered society, and that layered society is what we find today as well. So you can see the early days of, based on the backs of the farmer, we have all come there. And of course, based firstly on the backs of the sapiens being able to have the narrative and myths that brought people together and societies together. And the farmers then were able to then create food surpluses that brought the power structures in place that were then used to create wars and overcome society and so on and so forth. So they built palaces, forts, and what have you, and they used 90% of their wealth there. Okay, ramification of the need for mass cooperation. The problem is that not enough evolutionary time existed between the settlement of village cities and empires for sapiens to develop an instinct for mass cooperation. So sapiens could not depend on DNA to encourage. So essentially, there wasn't enough time for the evolution to kick in into our DNA. We just had to sort of move along by the very fact that of the power of the myths. So here we are, the myths, the imagined orders. What it gave us was essentially gods, human rights, nations, laws, justice, and money. So you can see these are all the basic building blocks of society, and that enable us to be what we are today. So essentially here, so the cultural substitute for this missing evolutionary instinct was the development. So basically, again, it is not the objective reality that is we are changing, but the imagined reality is what we are changing. So imagined orders are utilitarian, that are not objective reality here, unless the so sapient societies to work. So basically saying that it is our imagined realities that we are working with, or myths, and they're not necessarily the reality. The reality is the one that brought about a change with the DNA. which we have not had time to sort of do that. We've evolved a lot faster because of our imagined abilities. So these mass corporation networks were seldom voluntary. So they had to use force and what have you to bring societies together. Once the surpluses were there and the wealth was there, then the power structures started to use them. So what did they use by way of tools? They created gods. They're saying, well, God knows everything, and this person who's a man of God, he has all the answers and things like that. Whereas, of course, he didn't have any answers. It was just a myth that was something that was told to them, and they accepted that. And all these things that we have created to order our society, human rights. Well, human rights is one of those things that we talk about, as a very fundamental right of human being. But then there is another definition that China uses, because I know in the West, in the collective West, that we use this human rights quite a lot when we want to talk about democracy and freedoms of speech and all that. But then China says, look, human rights are okay, but community rights are more important. It's not the right of one individual, it's the right of the community to gain from whatever it is that they are planning to do, then rather than just giving one man a voice, so he can voice something, that he thinks is the right thing to do. So he says community rights are also very, very important, and that's what they sort of believe and follow. Okay, yeah, imagined orders are unlike natural orders. Here again, they're trying to, you know, highlight the difference between imagined orders, which is like a apple following on the head of Newton there. And then, of course, the imagined orders are always, like the flat earth. That's not a reality. It is something that we conceive or we made into what we thought was a reality, but it's not. Um, so there was a lot of violence and all that because of disagreement, because of these particular differences in people accepting uh, certain things as being gospel, as it were, to use a phrase. But one needs to be able to know that a narrative is a narrative, and there's nothing fundamentally true about it. Okay, vulnerability of myths and imagined orders. Imagined orders require belief in large parts of the population, especially the rulers. So, in order to be able to get the whole people together, they have to instill a certain power structure. The police here and the soldiers here, and a diktat from the king. So these were all things that we have evolved to bring about uh, a collective society, and which we believe orders and works in a certain way. And this is what we are also seeing today. Of course, there is a lot of difference. The collective West thinks, democracy, capitalism, that's the way to go. And of course, China believes that there's a mixed economy, that's the way to go. Russia, in the early days, thought socialism is the way to go. So all those types of differences are still there, and have these equivalent forces to keep them in order. Here we have this economic system. Now, economic system is the one that we mentioned, capitalism as being one of them. Again, it's a common understanding. There's no objective reality about it. There's a common understanding that we all put our faith uh, in uh, in the fact that there are certain rules that we have to follow, and so on. Even money is a concept. Um, so, how do we cause people to believe in imagined? So how do we get a lot of people to believe it? Now, one way to believe is that they say that there is somebody who has all the answers, and that's God, and they get people to accept that because we don't have all the answers, but we imagine God is there and He has all the answers. And then there's the other way of also getting people to believe in them, which is to educate people thoroughly in the principles of imagined orders. So if you forget about the statistics of the edges, but we take the central core of acceptance of the statistical graph, then we know that most of the people have bought into the idea. And of course, embedded in this, in our material world, so we've built into our society all sorts of stories, even from the time of telling children some stories about witches and this, that, or the other. Uh, we have built these narratives to the point that we start to actually believe that this is how things are. Or if it is a fairy story, it is a fairy story, but it has a moral behind it, and therefore we accept that moral. So those are the types of things that we weave into our educational system to be able to then keep the society together. Okay, so here we are, educate and market the imagined orders so that they shape our desires. Now, the other thing, of course, is that once you educate a certain group of people, then what happens is that you can also be able to cause a certain amount of preference for their selection of beliefs as well. And we see that in advertising very much is the case. When they advertise in a certain way, we get to believe in that, or our preferred preference goes that way, and we buy that product. So these imagined types of stories are the ways that are knit into the society to be able to have that society work in a particular way. So here is the term here, subjective. It's a single belief. So if there is a subjective narrative, that it dies with the individual. But an objective one is the one that has a lot more legs, if you like, to it, and therefore a lot more people believe in it. That is, objective reality is like the real radioactivity. We haven't imagined it; it's real. So we have then we have this intersubjectivity exists within the communication network that links the subjective consciousness of many individuals. So we bring in both subjective and objective sort of narratives together to buy into a particular thing that most of the people believe in. Okay, then along comes scripts as well, because scripts, the myths, up to a point where audio, people used to sing ballads and go around from one village to another, telling stories and so on. Then, of course, printing presses and all that, the script was expanded. Script was expanded for much more wider distribution when the presses came in. But before the presses came in, of course, we also had this notion as to what to write. And we have, I think, going back to the Code of Hammurabi, which is about 2,500 years ago, the laws were set up as to what the social order should be like. There should be some punishment and so on for wrongdoing. So those types of things started to be put down in script form. And that became much more widely available to everybody, various parts of the world. So the scaling up of information distribution came about. So then, of course, this is where we are today as well, but struggling with the idea of electronic media, which is 1,000 times much more powerful in terms of being able to work that much faster and get from across the world in seconds and so on. So that the scale has improved quite a bit. Now, here we are talking about morality here. Complex civils seem to require imagined hierarchies and unjust discrimination. Now, systems supported by prejudice feeds on themselves. So, along with this narrative comes what is useful for the people who's creating that narrative. So you might sort of create an enemy and say the other is the person who should be blamed for your ill sort of for your difficulties. They're taking away your freedoms and what have you. So all these false narratives also get created, and then that's part of history as to how that has evolved to give us where we are. Cultural prejudices, also the fact that we have certain inequality in in society because there was discrimination, blacks and whites and religions and so on. So these narratives had their own downside to it, although they had the upside as well, but the downside were there as well, and people exploit that even today. So we can see that all over. You can see that in the American order. There's a big hierarchy between not just America, between rich and poor. It's all over the world. So now this is talking about the gender, the patriarchy, and so on. Now, why men? Because they had muscle power, so they managed to sort of grab whatever it is they can. For women, they had less muscle power, so they were pushed a little bit in the background there. So we have now this patriarchal system still existing, whereas I think the feminist movement is doing a lot to try and change that around, to highlight the fact that they are better, if not better than men, which I think is probably right. Okay, so I'm going to leave it at that because I'm not sure how much time was used up. Okay, then we can have a little discussion or even talk about a bit about Q&A. Okay. Oh, if that, in fact, I've got a lot more time actually. I might go to this part here now, which is this. Now, we talked about the narratives that created our society, and we created this narrative of money, of empire, the structure, the power structures, and religion. So each of these things we can see how they have been, in fact, come about. Okay, let's look at that. So for the unification of mankind, this is, again, going back to the idea that we are trying to unite the whole humankind with some fundamentally accepted ideas. And what are those fundamental accepted ideas? Are these. Right, here we are. This is the history we were talking about. So here we are saying that every culture that has evolved from the time of, if you like, the agricultural revolution, we have had, in fact, a steady change happening as well. It hasn't been static. And that change is what he's talking about. Is in a constant state of flux. So they go under transitions because of their own sort of dynamics of and so on. Here is an example. A Tasmanian culture has not been the same for time immemorial. It's impossible to find a culture that hasn't changed over time. And we all accept that. It seems obvious to us now. Here we are constantly trying to reconcile contradictions and processes fuel change, cognitive dissonance. Okay. Here, example, the modern world fails to square liberty with equality. Now, these are two, if you like, opposite poles. You can't have total liberty and then also equality because, not all people are equal. So we can't, in fact, we accept both, but we can't guarantee that every individual will be free to do as he wishes, even if he produces a global wealth disparity. So this is liberty, although it's there, but we can't deliver that. And equality services are the same for everyone, so there cannot be a great disparity. So this is the idea in notion. I like the idea, but it can't be delivered. This is the problem with some of these labels that we use. It helps us to conceive as to what it is, but it's not there to sort of deliver it at the actual level. So here, consider the number of human tumors. Okay, this is basically, okay, let me just skip that. So in summary, today we share some economic systems. Now, I told you that even money is a sort of a narrative that we have created because there's no objective reality. There's no actual worth. If I take out a 20-pound note, it doesn't really have any value because it's just a piece of paper. So the fact that we believe that it has purchasing power and all that is because we have a common understanding that amongst ourselves in society, that I can exchange it for some value. Therefore, it has value. So it's our imagined reality, if you like, that we have created. And the same thing for capitalism, all that functions at a financial level. Then you have these, this is for the economic system, we have money and capitalism. Then at the geopolitical system level, we have empire and democracy. Now, empires have also had worked, and democracies have also worked or not worked, but yet there are those types of structures available. And then, of course, in religion, we have these things. We have religion and liberalism. You can either be religious or not religious. So we have those types of uh, narratives, if you like, that a lot of people believe in because they accept it. Now, it is by choice because we have grown up with the education that has weaved all this notion into our heads. And therefore, when we grow up, we accept it automatically without even questioning it. So, yeah, money. But what Hariri is saying is that it is not real. And I think that's important to be able to know that. That is why Hariri refers to them as universal imagined orders. And he notes that they are all dependent on some degree of trust. Yeah, that I think is obvious, and we've seen that. So that had to do with money. Yeah, no, this is just more here. Money is most universal and most efficient system of mutual trust ever devised. Okay, money, apogee of human tolerance, highest point, can bridge almost any cultural gap. Every culture has some equivalent money. For all his hate and disagreement with the culture of the USA, he had no qualms about using our money. And this is Bin Laden. So he used all the sort of tools at his disposal to sort of do whatever he wanted to do. That's what he's saying. So essentially, our imagined realities can be translated to something quite destructive. Money has a dark side, as I've just said, as always, tries to break through the barriers of the principles of human communities and families, honor, loyalty, morality, love, are becoming commodities. Everything is becoming commodity. So, as you know, because we have now accepted this notion of capitalism and we have the medium of exchange for money, uh, everything can be made into a commodity. And that's what he's saying. Even honor and loyalty that can be made into a commodity and sold, and people buy it or don't buy it into it, and that is today. It's common nowadays to believe that market always prevails, but it is not historically true. Okay, now because we've got the media and so on, we have conflicting messages, and maybe we don't accept everything. Anyway, what's this example that's given is the philosopher Habermas suggests that the economic system is based on rules dependent on cost benefit, efficiency, and performance. Systems that don't necessarily resonate with humanistic property. So essentially, our notion of capitalism has to do with how efficiently we distribute, uh, how, how we increase our growth and consumption and so on. But it, it is not necessarily done in a fair way. This is what it's basically saying. So money doesn't have an equalizer in it. So it has to do with how we, in fact, deploy this, and that's what the society of structure of society is nowadays. So we have, in fact, created the value of each work in such a way that 20 pounds will get me my shoe repaired. He can see me for about 5 minutes and specialist, and that money binds the skills that we purchase in such a way that we are able to operate in a society. So it is basically a universal trust that the back of the money is not the individuals. Okay, basically it's that. Next one that we're going to look at is imperial illusions. Okay. Now, I'm going to be going through that thing here. This is a xenophobic. Xenophobic society means evolution has made sapiens a xenophobic creature, we and they. So there is that idea that I'm me and you are you, you're different in what I am. So evolution as sapien has brought in that different, because we become aware, because our brain recognizes that we are not all the same. So we see, differences that are there. Sometimes, if they become too sort of drastic or different, then we become xenophobic or fearful. Empires have been the most common form of political organization for 2005 years. So political order. So what we're talking about is these structures that have kept the society functioning as it have evolved, and of course where we are today as well. So here's political order. We can see democracies, we've got autocracies, and we've got all sorts of dictatorships, this, that, or the other, all over the world. Then we have these things, the search for one pure, authentic civilization untainted by sin or more than window dressing for true nationalism and bigotry. So we have also this notion of nationalism. Well, what is nationalism? Nationalism, again, is a conceived a narrative that puts together a certain number of ideas together, which appeals to a lot of people and makes them feel safer, and then highlights them in such a way that they're different to the other who has a different narrative, and therefore um, they are not part of the national scene. So nationalism we see already in the world is on the rise. You can see in India, Modi is appealing to nationalism, and therefore the minorities are very fearful. Then you have in Europe, nationalism also sort of rearing its head. We have nationalism in UK because we've got the move to the right, and Tories are there for the last 13 years or whatever. And of course, they're coming in with very draconian laws about on immigration and what have you. So these are appeals to or dog whistles to nationalism, and that's a very dangerous type of weapon. Global problems liberate the legitimacy of the nation state and private control. Now, the story doesn't stop at the nation state. It's global. Now, there are global issues that the nations have to get together to try and resolve. And that's where they have to come together with multilateral, organization and so on. So we need to have that structure as well in place. Okay, so let me go to the next one. This is about convergence. Ideas, people, and goods, technology spread more easily within the borders of an empire versus fragmented regions. Yeah. Now, the search for larger empires, I know historically that everybody wants to conquer and have as large as empire as possible, because then they're able to sort of bring in order to the way that they want it to have, and more power and so on. So the greed basically is there. I don't know whether greed is what I would call an objective reality, but nevertheless, it can be fashioned in a way to say that is part and parcel of both objective and imagined realities as well. So oppression, empires are built and maintained with vicious slaughter, brutal oppression, and so on. So here oppression is also part and parcel. So all these things that we are talking about are the structures, characteristics that are exploited in order to keep society together. And these are just highlighting those things in a bit more detail. When you've got this common culture, eligibility needs a common culture, easier within a common culture. Yeah, for say, what is English? We don't know what is English culture is, but we have some vague ideas. It's to do with history, it has to do with music, it has to do with stories, with narratives, the legends, the myths, all those that came about. And of course, people have come in from various parts of the world into UK and have become English in a way. I think the Anglo-Saxons came in, and then other people from Europe came in. So we have essentially, again, as we said earlier on, culture is not static. It's always dynamic. It's moving. So the moment you have bring in a new technology or new sort of people coming in together, they interact differently, they bring in different values. So the culture also changes. Then we have here cosmopolitanism. Yeah, that's how we come together and make for a new one. As the old saying goes, there's a thesis, and there's antithesis, and then you have synthesis. So although it's a philosophical type of terminology of answer somebody, it can be applied to here as well. So religion now. Now religions have all these types of aspects to it. This is the monotheistic religion, has these. Now, the basis of that is that it came from up there, from the sky. Therefore, it's superhuman. It's above us. It cannot be questioned. And if you all accept that, that it binds us all into a religion, be it Islam, be it Christianity, be it Judaism, what have you. In fact, this is the thing, that's the monotheism that I just mentioned. Those are monotheistic religions. And this helps to solidify with the myths that they bring into the religion, the stories that are being told, which we don't know whether they're true or not, but they're in a book that we all believe in, the Bible or Torah or the Quran or what have you. And that gives it that legitimacy. Now, here, every aspect of religion is, of course, the dualism. We believe the good and the evil. We believe in justice and not justice. We, believer, non-believer. Those types of dualism we all accept, and it's part and parcel of our thing there. And then you've got humanism. Today's humanism is religion versus liberalism. So you can have no religion or just or religion. Religion or no religion. You can have socialism all equal. This is liberalism is equal versus socialism all equal, evolutionary superhuman. This is the God that a lot of religions believe in. This is the ideology like socialism and communism. And then, of course, we've got the liberalism and the humanistic thing. So there we are. So we've covered, I think, all that. So this is basically saying, let me see how we're doing for time. Yeah, okay, I'll stop here. Essentially, this is the last little leg, which is saying that as far as success is concerned, it has to be measured with the outcome of whatever the prescription is. If it is successful, it can be successful for a certain length of time, or it can be successful for longer, but it can't be successful all the time. So this is all to do, again, with chance coming in and having society having to face and evolve new solutions and new ways of being able to manage. That's why history teaches us a little, but cannot teach us everything. Okay, I'm going to stop there. This is just chance to say. Okay, that's the end. And I'm going to stop the share. And then we have some Q&A. If anybody has any particular questions, unmute yourself and go ahead. I'm sorry I had to sort of talk very fast and had to cover a lot of material there. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah.
I had to catch up quickly. I had to read a bit in here so that I could follow what you were getting at. It's quite interesting. One question that occurs to my mind when you were talking about the weight of the human brain increasing. The fact that it weighs more does not mean it is more intelligent.
Intelligence is something different.
For example, take the elephant. As a species, they have the largest brain in the world. But nowhere you can say the elephant is more intelligent than the human being or any other animal.
Yeah. Well, I gave you the example of a Neanderthal. He had a larger brain, but he didn't use it.
How do we know?
Because he was overcome by the Sapiens, who were able to create the narrative. And in the brain, you see, we have certain number of neurons. And it's not the number of neurons that really matter at the end of the day. It's the paths that get connected to the neuron. And if you've got 2 billion neurons in the brain, the number of paths that you can create is phenomenally big. And how developed the brain gets with all the knowledge that it acquires means it has that many more links to each of these neurons. And if you keep using them, these neurons don't die away. They keep on sort of connecting to other neurons. and the number of paths that it can create is enormous. So if one is able to create the brain and a narrative, that enables more links to be created in the brain, and that makes you much more able to fight off your enemies by planning, by grouping together, bringing people together and telling them to act this way or that way. So that is where the big sort of advance has come in the Sapiens. Sapiens were the one who utilized their brain to give them the additional capacity for having these links created within the brain.
Equally, I mean, if we look at the human brain, from birth up to the age of 30, you're creating more connections. From the age of 30 onwards, you start losing cells. So does that mean the human brain is getting smaller?
No, that has been disproved, because what has happened is, if you keep your brain active, even at the age of 80, your brain is quite sort of big and has not lost too many cells because of age. You see, it is a question of how active you keep your brain. If you keep it active, then the cells don't die. It's a bit like this, if you don't use it, you lose it. So we have to recognize that our ability to be as aware and as alert as when you're 30, as when you're 70, is possible. And we are seeing now people living longer and longer and being as alert as they were quite in their 60s. The old 60s is the new 30, I think, or something, they say.
That's good. But it's the same as your body. If you don't exercise it, it all goes, all the muscles go, and you've had it. You have to keep exercising.
The body is there's a lot of muscles, and if you don't exercise the muscles, you lose it.
Yeah.
That I accept. But is the brain also, because the brain is not a muscle, the brain is fat. It's
the brain is
1.5 kilo of fat.
it's a fat which is a very, very smart fat. It knows what it's doing.
So it does not respond in the same way as the muscle. But I accept the more you exercise it, the more you try and learn, it pushes away Alzheimer, if you like. But is it as agile as it was when you were 20? I don't think so.
Well, if you look at older people who are fairly alert and look at the young teenager, now, if you can see, the difference is more in the intensity of the feeling. What happens, I think the muscles lose a little bit of the ability to transmit the signals that get recognized as electrical signals in the brain. So that efficiency goes down, I think, in the muscle end, not so much in the brain end. The brain still recognizes pain as pain and
Yes,
can be and
the
can
basic,
enjoy whatever.
the basic level. But if you look at a person and you say to him, when you were 20, you were able to solve these problems. You cite A-level maths, for example. Can you still do the test for the A-level math now at the age of 60 or 70 or 80?
Yeah, some do. Some can.
Some do.
Yeah.
Some do. Some, but we're talking about the human brain in general, not exceptionally intelligent people.
No, you see, if you look at the lifestyle of people, it varies quite a bit. If you take the lifestyle of the people here out in the West who are living longer, for instance,
yes,
and compare them to the people who are in Africa who are younger, the the Alzheimer has come into the Europe a lot much faster than in Africa. You see, in Africa, the people, I suppose, they probably have smaller life, lifespan, but nevertheless, it is in Europe that we find that the dementia is sort of coming in a big way. And a lot of people say it is because people are living longer. It also has to do with the lifestyle. Because we have a lot more comforts here. We don't have to go around and dig for food or whatever. So in a way, the lifestyle makes a difference to the brain, how it operates and develops. And we saw that in this cognitive history, that the fact that they develop tools increase the size of the brain, because that enables them to imagine and create more things. And therefore, they were able to grow more brain cells. Because if you keep it active, it grows, it doesn't die. Some do die. In fact, the body, every 2 weeks, I'm told, changes its cells. So the brain also creates cells. So it's a question of having to find out how it does it and be able to, help it. Yeah.
One thing interesting is that the theory was proven that cells do not start dying at the age of 30. Is that clear, or is it still in debate?
You see, at the moment, we are still finding out a lot about the brain.
Yes.
And we don't know enough about it. And least of all, we don't know what consciousness is. Therefore, it's a big mystery as well. It's an organ which is, I think, astonishingly complex. And I think sooner or later, we will have more answers to it, especially now that AI and all that is coming and people are looking at what is this intelligence, what is data, and what is information, all that. Those questions are being asked. So we'll get to know sooner or later. Yes, Pam?
Oh no, I was just coughing and agreeing. Yes, AI is really going to change our world, isn't it? Well, it already has. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we are in for a lot of surprises in the next decade, in this decade even, by the year 2030. I think because the whole program has accelerated to the point where we are seeing phenomenal type of productivity in that area. Like for instance, these self-drive cars are coming in, the robots are coming in, Optimus, the Tesla people are bringing in so much advances, and then we are going off to space, and then we are going to have biotechnology merging with technology. Sooner or later, our brains are going to have some chips inserted, which will enable us to keep pace with the robots and not be sort of regarded as and not be regarded as
just to clear up one point. AI intelligence, the AI is not really started. We are at the beginning of it.
Yeah.
Robots are mechanical things that they do mechanical things.
Yeah.
What we are talking about when we talk about AI is, if you like, a robot that can learn and do things better than what we taught it to do in the first place.
Yeah, that's the technology that is being used to, in
That's
fact,
the technology
overcome.
that's coming, and that is what the issue is.
Yeah. You see, already we have seen the results of that. When they taught the AlphaGo program, it beat the Grandmaster. Now we've got ChatGPT, which in a way is scanning the library of the world and being able to give you answers and get refined as well and make it into human speech. I think we already got that. Then we've got Tesla self-driving cars, which are learning from the videos that are given to them, and not just from the program code that was the old way of doing things. So we've got lots of new technologies that are coming in, which are based on learning or giving the capacity to learn, because you can't replicate all of reality around us and code it in some way. We just have to show it, and we have to tell it, we have to train it, and then it learns and it does it. Okay, anybody else?
Oh, definitely very interesting. Lots of food for thought there.
Yeah, well, I think it's made me having to look for a cup of tea now.
Yes.
Okay, thank you all
Okay,
for
thank you very much. Thanks.
coming
you.
and asking all those good questions. Thank you.
Thank you.